Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Islamic Vice Podcast. I'm your host Majid, and today I have with me as my guest the founder and host of the Islamic History Podcast, Brother Muttaqi Ismail. Assalamu alaikum, brother, and once again, welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam, Brother Majid. Ramadan Mubarak, and thank you for inviting me once again. Alhamdulillah.
No, yeah, Ramadan Barak to you, bro. It's always a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and especially in the month of Ramadan, when hopefully the blessings are there to be taken. What better to be speaking to one of my brothers from the other side of the Atlantic.
Alhamdulillah. I'm glad to speak with you, and your podcast is heard by people on this side of the ocean. I can assure you of that. So, alhamdulillah. So I'm glad to be speaking to both sides.
Yeah, good stuff, man. Good stuff. So, bro, how's how's Ramadan in America, man? How's Ramadan in America?
It's so far so good. I don't expect anything much different. Fortunately, the entire city of Atlanta, at least, and the most of the surrounding areas, we all started on the same day this year, so that was good. There was no awkward 2 Ramadan starts, so that's a good thing. We'll see how it ends, though. We got one more.
That's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing, man.
Other than that, it's fine. I also have to go to the masjid, but of course, I'm a good 4 hours ahead of you, so I'll have to go to the masjid later on today. Weekends really the only day I can really get to participate at the masjid, but inshallah, I'll make it later on today and participate today and tomorrow. I'll get to work.
No, sure. I mean, today I was thinking, bro, of a topic to chat to you about. I mean, in all honesty, you know how it is. When we start talking, we can talk about everything and anything, and so. But I was thinking, what I want to speak about today really was issue of unity, really. Because sometimes people have also described Ramadan as the month of unity. And I guess we see this, don't we? And especially, to be honest with you, it just seems like it's happened this way where even in the UK, it just fell on the same day. Now, obviously, some people are, following the what they believe would be the Sunnah. Other people may be following calculations. However, whatever it is, the fact is most people are doing it on the same day. And I think, like you're saying, I didn't know about America. But what it has done is maybe it's kind of masked over, at least for 29 30 days, all the hoo-ha of who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah.
But you do get this sense of unity, especially when you're at Taraweeh, Salah, or if you visit the mosque for iftar. I mean, I don't know whether you normally break fast at home or you go to the masjid, but you get that sense of, unity where you're like with kind of like total strangers who are more than happy to let you eat first before they eat. Do you know what I mean? This is like kind of unheard of in this capitalist, materialistic, individualistic type of society. So that's why I wanted to just like kick off and ask whether you get that vibe in America, because obviously America is huge compared to UK, right? I don't know if you have any. I mean, do you have any issues there with masjids and stuff like this, or generally is it a good vibe?
We do have divisions, of course. Also, our Muslim community is much smaller than I believe yours is, and at least by percentage, it's probably less than 1%, if even that. Most Muslims are only in the larger cities. Atlanta, being a larger city, would have quite a few. But as far as the unity is concerned for Ramadan, yes, I can say definitely I do feel the unity with Ramadan. I've only been to, this is almost our 3rd day now, right? This is our 3rd day now. So I've only had one iftar at the masjid, so it'll be my 2nd one if I go later on tonight, inshallah, which I kind of have to go. So I did go on Thursday. I was at work, so by the time I get off work, it's pretty much time to break fast by the time I get off work. And so I went to a local masjid in the area, and it was, of course, well, this is one thing I can say about the unity is that I went inside to make aftar before I went out. Because I was coming off work, so I was rushing to the masjid to make aftar before I went out. So I made aftar about 10, 15 minutes before the sun went down. As I was walking outside the masjid, a brother was was he asked me, brother, you're not going to break fast with us? I said, yes, I'm sure I am. I was going to, I was going to my car to get something. And I left my phone or something in my car. I can't remember. Went back to my car. He was like, brother, you're not going to break fast with us? And I said, yes, I'm just getting something from my car. And that was just that little thing right there. You know, usually leaving the mask and nobody cares. But him, he's making sure that I stay with him, or making sure I break fast with him was a good thing. I did wind up breaking fast, and after the iftar, they had the box dinners to take home. So biryani, by the way, which is one of my favorite foods. So I went ahead and no, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. This will be my second one today, my second iftar at Masjid today. So we'll see how that goes. I expect it to be pretty. I expect the same thing. I go to this masjid all the time, so I expect things to be just the same way, inshallah.
Yeah, like you said, you do get that sense of brotherhood, and I mean, I guess the masjid you were talking about, because you were talking about biryani, yeah. So it must have
Yeah,
been
yeah,
like Indian or Pakistani background type of mosque.
yeah, yeah. It was in the northern suburbs of Atlanta, where my job is, and I don't always go to work in the office, but I do have to go on Thursday. So I went up there, and there it was. And so it's the closest masjid to me, only about 10-minute drive away. But yeah, it is a mostly and that is it is a mostly Indo-Pak. I'm not Indo-Pak sounds offensive. I'm not sure that's correct, so I don't mean to say if it's right, but I'll just say Southeast Asian or South Asian, um, or Indian subcontinent. But yeah, they're mostly from the subcontinent, and from there, well, today inshallah, I will be going to this is where the divisions come in. It's not really divisions, more like cultural things where we do have a lot of African American Muslims in Atlanta. But Atlanta is a mostly African American city, mostly Black Americans. About like 60% Black American in Atlanta. So
Really, the whole
yeah,
city, yeah, Atlanta,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's one of the few cities that's predominantly Black. Only a few large cities are predominantly Black, and it's one of the few. So with that, there's going to be a lot of Black Masajids here. Well, I hate to say Black Masajid, but Masajid are predominantly Black population. No one's prohibited from going anywhere, just where people go, where it's most convenient to them. So where I actually live is in East Atlanta, which is more Somali, people from East Africa, Somalia, Ethiopia, and Eritrea. There's still also people from the subcontinent. People, a lot of Burmese, Malay, Burmese have moved here now recently. Um, a few Arabs, some Bosnians as well. But the predominant Muslim group is from East Africa. So if I want to make prayers just like locally, just like regular Salat or Fajr, Salat or Isha, the masters I will go to, the three closest ones to me are mostly Somali. Most of the population is mostly Somali. However, and even within the Somali community, there's like three different ones. There's a Salafi Somali, Sufi Somali, and the in between. People from Atlanta will know what I'm talking about. But and for the Black community, or that's Southwest Atlanta, that's not nowhere near where I live, but that's mostly what people would quote unquote call the hood, the ghetto, so forth and so on. And in that area, there's a lot of masajid established by Black Americans, people who converted to Islam a couple of decades ago, or maybe came from the Nation of Islam and came into mainstream Islam and things like that, and started building their own masjid, starting their own masjid. So they're mostly in the communities where they live, and so most of them go there. And that's actually where I'm going to go. The masjid I'm going to go tonight is in Southwest Atlanta, not too far from the capital, and that's where it was a masjid that is. I don't know the history of the masjid, but I know it was started by people who were formerly part of the Nation of Islam, and after the Nation of Islam, the original Nation of Islam. I know I'm getting into history. My history, my thing, so I can't help but doing these things sometimes.
Bro, go for it. Go for it. You know, history my thing as well.
Okay, the original Nation of Islam was, of course, founded by Elijah Muhammad, and of course had the famous people with Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. In 1975, Elijah Muhammad died. His son, Wallace Muhammad, took over, and he started bringing them over to mainstream Islam. That's kind of
Really?
finally completed.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah.
So like,
He took over.
so Louis Farrakhan, for example, is he mainstream? I'm sure he's not
No,
mainstream.
he's not. No, there's when Wallace Muhammad, who was Elijah Muhammad's son, he began bringing the Nation of Islam towards mainstream Islam. It was by steps, not all the way. It was like his father died in 1975. By 1980, 81, it was kind of more or less basically mainstream. Still some things people and mainstream Islam would disagree with, but still mostly there. By that time, and Louis Farrakhan was part of that group also, because they changed names several times. They went from Nation of Islam to Bilalians to something else, American Muslim Society, something like that. Anyway, by 1980 and 1981, Louis Farrakhan was fed up with it. He was like, "You're leaving your father's teachings." He didn't like what Wallace Muhammad was doing, or he changed his name. His Muslim name was Wadifuddin Muhammad. Some people just call him WD Muhammad. But in any case, Louis Farrakhan was like, "This is not what your father was teaching," and he left and restarted the original, or he believed was the original Nation of Islam. And so there were still many people within the former Nation of Islam that agree with Louis Farrakhan, and they left with him. Not a whole lot, but many did leave with him. And then, of course, he attracted people from outside of that group as well. And but even with that, he is. Many people believe that he is slowly, because he's an old man now. Remember, he was rocking with Malcolm X, so he's been around for a long time.
Around Malcolm X, man.
Yeah, so he's probably in his 80s by now. And now I've spoken with a few of them, and I'm surprised how now there's still those two critical things, of course, but I'll get into that in a moment. But the modern Nation of Islam is much more in line, at least ritualistically, with the practices than with they're much more in line with mainstream Islam than they used to be in the days of Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad. A lot of those things back then have been discarded, or they no longer preach those things anymore. But there are still those two big things: the things of Allah coming down in the person of Fard Muhammad and Elijah Muhammad being a prophet.
But they're massive, though, innit? It's like that. Those are the.
Yeah, those are two big things. Those are two.
Do you know what I mean? If they didn't believe those,
yeah,
and they never prayed Salah, they got more chance, right, of salvation, right, than they have believing those things.
Yeah, and I discussed it with them, just try to understand their way, because I had to update my understanding of them. And they split hairs with the whole prophet thing, was that he was the prophet and the messenger, and I'm not, whatever, guys. We're not playing those word games. So I really don't. That I do want to know, so I'm up to date with the information, and also I still see a lot of people still come from them to us. So I take at least my opinion. I know everyone may not agree. I take a very soft approach with them. I don't. There are some who do not now. There are some Muslims, but there are some hardcore Muslims of African descent who do not take a soft approach with them. They're like, they will be willing to say these are not. They'll label the worst accusations against them and everything. I try to take a more softer approach because I still see all the time many of them still come over. And after Farrakhan dies, I don't know if that organization is going to survive much after him. And Lord knows best. I don't know. And it's splintered off so many times. There's so many splinter groups from them as well. It's Farrakhan, his personality and his outspokenness and his past accomplishments and his legacy is what keeps it going, in my opinion. Once he dies, I don't know. I'm not sure if it'll last much longer after that.
Yeah, he's a man of many talents, and I'm sure, to be honest with you, when I remember watching a Netflix series on Malcolm X, and you remind me now, actually, because I can't remember who's speaking, but there is one person who was talking about Louis Farrakhan, how he was kind of like, he almost accepted the actual teachings of Islam, and then he just did a 180. Maybe because it didn't serve his purpose. Maybe he would have probably lost any kind of legitimacy within the group. Who knows?
I don't know what caused him to. There's a couple of things in his history that I'm kind of speaking anecdotally, but I know in the early 1980s when he first left, it was just him. He just felt Wallace Muhammad was not following the teachings of his father, Elijah Muhammad. I don't know if there was any opportunistic goals behind that. Maybe there was, but that was his call. That was his spoken reason for leaving, because Wallace Muhammad was leaving the teaching of his father, and he really did leave many things. For instance, one of the major hallmarks of the Nation of Islam was the Fruit of Islam, which was the paramilitary organization, the defense force, their security force, which was really paramilitary. they wore suits and bow ties, but they were packing guns and stuff. And they once had the reputation as being the black mafia in the United States. So that's
Right. Okay. Okay.
yeah, that's But after Wallace Muhammad became the leader, he disbanded the organization because it was pretty much a threat to him as well. So he disbanded the organization.
Sounds a bit like the oh man, you know the Ottomans and the
Yeah, the Janissaries. Yeah,
Janissaries. You know when that threats are there.
yeah, yeah. I kind of got the same. I was gonna say this sounds familiar. I said I read something like this before, but yeah, now I never made that connection. But yeah, you are right. There's a very similar story with There's been many times when certain leaders have decided or emperors have decided that they got to get rid of a certain powerful armed group to maintain their own safety. But then he also did other things like back in the back before in Elijah Muhammad days, the Nation of Islam they didn't have standard prayers of Allahu Akbar and all the sajda and ruku and all those things. They didn't have all that. They did fast, but they fasted uh, during December or the month of to mark with Christmas, the mass of Christmas. Um, but after Wallace Muhammad, he began to bring in, he began to teach. He removed all the chairs from what they called mosques back then, but they were because they used to just pray sitting down. Their prayer was just dua. They would just make dua. So that was their prayer. They didn't have 5 daily prayers. So he removed the chairs and installed rugs and started teaching people how to pray properly. Um, Before they used the Bible a lot more. They used the Bible in conjunction with the Quran, but more of the Bible than the Quran. The Bible began to fade away into the distance. The Quran became more prevalent. Now, people may disagree with his interpretation of the Quran because his interpretation of the Quran, sometimes his explanation can be very wrapped up in a lot of mysticism. And so I know some people may disagree with that, but it's still the Quran and not the Bible. So, and all of it doesn't necessarily disagree, but some of it I know people hear it, they say they don't disagree with that. They don't necessarily agree with that, but that's neither here nor there. The fact that it is still more or less, it is, I'll say not more or less, it is in line with Islam proper. Beyond that, so if you were to go to one of these massages now, you would not notice much difference except for most people that are black, and once again anyone can come in, and we have people come in from all parts. Anyone who works there, for people who have businesses in the area, and they want to make salat, you should come there for Juma, which is there, and we have everything is the same. There's no mention of Elijah Muhammad as far as those pictures of Elijah Muhammad on the wall, no talk of Fard Muhammad and everything like that. People do praise the Wallace Muhammad, Imam W. Muhammad. They do praise him in many ways, or they talk about what they learned under him and talk about his teaching. So I would say he's revered kind of like a Sufi Sheikh might be revered, or an Imam might be revered, a local Imam who is popular in a local community might be revered. So he's dead. He died now. He's dead. He died back in 2008, Wallace Muhammad. But if you were to go there, there's no fundamental difference between the belief, the creed, and the practices with mainstream Islam. Some things that people have commented about is, of course, to disagree with. Some people do disagree with Wallace Muhammad, Imam W. Muhammad's interpretation of the Quran. Some people do disagree with that. And the thing is, we have a lot of, and because we are mostly in the black community, we do have a lot of new converts or new Muslims or people who are, like, rarely there. So we do get a lot of, I say the women don't, not most of the women, but some of the women do not always wear the proper clothing. So
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not saying not flamboyant or anything like that, but they may not be in the proper clothing, and it's not strictly enforced. So, and there's reasons for that. There's historical reasons, cultural reasons, and also we do have a lot of converts. More than any other, I don't say more than any massages, but those at the massages that come from, we're in the black community. We're going to have, black Muslims more than any other Muslim probably have a split in both worlds, in the non-Muslim world and the Muslim world. And so many black Muslims marry. I know other people of other ethnicities do as well, but many people convert while they're still married to their non-Muslim partners or wives or whatever. They still convert, and their wives don't convert, and they stay Muslim, and so they gotta juggle that. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes it happens where the wife converts and the husband does not. That doesn't happen often, and it's
Yeah,
difficult. I know.
that's
There's
very true.
no there's no easy way around it. But it doesn't happen often. Usually it's the man who converts. But I have heard a few stories where that has happened. We have a lot of stories where, and also the Muslim community has more of a history with civil rights struggle. With Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Mike Tyson, Dave Chappelle, there's more, there's more, there's a lot, there's the funny jokes of selling bean pies and stuff like that. I'm not sure you know what a bean pie is, but okay. A bean pie is like it's a pastry made by the Nation of Islam, and the Nation of Islam way back in the day, it was like one of the main things they used to sell, and so it became like a joke. So you'll hear modern comedians when they joke about the Nation of Islam, they'll talk about bean pies. It tastes
Okay.
really good. If you ever come here, or if you're having anything in the UK, I don't know, but it's definitely an American Muslim dish. So it tastes good. I assure you. I've had one of my he's American. He's an American Pakistani friend tasted it. He's like, this is wonderful. So, but but so there's reasons behind that. But yeah, the khutbahs I will say are more long-winded. Even I give khutbahs at my masjid. It's not my masjid, but the masjid I normally go to. I give khutbahs, and I can't give a khutbah for less than 30 minutes. Nobody, it'll be up. People get upset with me if it's less than 30 minutes because
Hilarious. It's opposite
yeah,
here.
it's not. Yeah, they're not gonna run me out of town or anything like that. But yeah, I got it. I've learned that I got it. My khutbah got to be 45 minutes or more because people are used to because the means are coming from a Christian tradition.
Oh,
They're used to
the sermons
yeah,
and
they're used
stuff.
to these long, and they want that fiery imam to fire them up and get them ready for the next week, for the coming week. So
But you know
you got
what?
to
To be
bring it.
honest with you, that is what the khutbah kind of like should do. It should give you that fuel for the
Yeah,
week. And also, I think, I mean, I'll ask you the question because Alhamdulillah, you're a khatib yourself, but I know a lot of people where uh especially from the youth, they'll have two issues with some of the khutbahs in the mosques here. Sometimes it's in a different language.
right.
But secondly, also like it's about topics which doesn't kind don't kind of resonate with them. It's about about smiling and about being good and this now. Whilst actually the way they see it is they want khutbahs where it relates to them, maybe problems that they're going through, issues through the ummah. You know, what I'm trying to say, like somewhat
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
like a bit more relevant.
right, right. And I say, and that's something I have to do in English. I don't speak any other language, so I have to do it in English. But there's of course the I forgot the name of the khutbah, the khutbah from the Prophet's time. Um, oh, can't think of it off the top of my head, but Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa so I say all that stuff just to fit it in, but usually I have to translate it too. So I say it in Arabic and then translate it into English for the listeners. Um, but when I give the khutbah, I try to well first I have my podcast skills help out a lot. So I can easily go off topics. Like a few months ago, sometime last year actually, I gave a khutbah on chapter 4, verse 34, 434, which is of course the quote unquote wife beating verse, so to speak. And
Okay.
but I used that not to try to I had to explain of course the verse. You gotta explain the controversial part. There's no getting around that. But it's really more about I use it mostly to talk to people about zina, about sex outside of marriage, which is a problem in the United States, a problem around the world.
Probably
And
everywhere.
it is yeah, and it exists in the Muslim community as well. Can't keep our heads in the sand about it. So I use it also to try to establish, without going fully red pill, to establish the whole the proper gender roles because that's how the verse starts out.
Very important, bro.
So and I've noticed that whenever people, if you go online and people talk about the when people talk, it's funny. My research on it just coming to mind. My research, people talk about the first couple lines. They always skip over that last line, the last part. It's so you go into in these marriage websites, Muslim marriage websites, or websites where they're trying to promote Islam, and they bring up that verse. They talk about the wife has to obey the husband got to provide for the wife. Even if she's a millionaire, got to provide for the wife. But they stop there. They don't go through. They don't say the rest of the verse. And I understand it's kind of hard to explain that in online, but I believe I gave a good explanation of it, and but in the point of it was not that controversial part, even though I had to talk about it. The point of it was really about zina,
Mm.
staying and the problems of zina and how it how it can harm us and how it harms society and our community in general. It's especially bad for the Black community, in that like 70% of all Black children are born out of wedlock in the United States.
There's like a kind of running, I don't know if you call it a running joke, or it's purely like it's racist, where you know, where it's like when you're talking about Black people in America, especially, I think they always, there's a joke about single parents and stuff like this, and the
Yeah,
husband,
yeah,
the father runs away or something. You must have heard of that.
yeah. Of course, of course. Yeah, that's it's a common trope. Baby mamas, single mamas, all those sort of things, and it is unfortunate, but the root of it is zina. That's the root of it. I
Subhanallah.
can't. Of course, yeah, people get married and still the father may run off, but that's rarer. And there's also legal and Islamic protections against that. But once you have zina, you lose a lot of the protection. Islamically, at least, you lose a lot of the protections Islamically. Now, legally, there are laws now that can help you out a little bit, but it still isn't a good look, and it still causes many more problems besides all of the emotional and financial and health problems that come along with it. And I know it's not, it's not common. It's not talking about Muslims. Muslims, you know the deal. But in the broader society, it's not I don't know, logical, I guess, or wise, or I don't want to say the word cool. It's not proper to say just abstain until you're married. Just abstain until you're married. And I know that people, the broader society, will not agree with that, but it will solve a lot of those problems.
Yeah, but
It, it will,
that's the thing in it, bro. If you think about it, um, it's okay to commit adultery and have mistresses, but
mm,
a man is not allowed to marry more than once. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're saying, all the
oh boy,
zina and stuff like that. How much
yeah,
Islam is very the Sharia, when it's established in obviously the proper state, is very
mm,
preventative. The laws are very preventative. It kind of like, in most cases, it cuts off the avenues to the problem. You
right,
understand, like, free mixing. If there's no free mixing, and then really people shouldn't be really even getting together, and then things crack off afterwards because they should
right,
not have been together in the first place. As an example, it's very
right,
preventative.
exactly. And oh boy, don't if the whole polygamy thing is always a hot topic, but even non-Muslims want to hear about that one. but but uh but essentially, yeah, the khutbah was hopefully designed for that, and I mean, hopefully they received it well. But I do know what you mean, that I don't go to, actually I do go to the most of the time when I'm working, if I don't have Friday off and I have to rush to the mass on my lunch break and rush back for Juma, I go to the place that's closest to me where I live, and yeah, you have your differences in masjid flavors. There's one where I live in the east side of Atlanta, like I said, so it's mostly Somalis, and some of them are born and raised here, and so they're able um, to hold both lines and be able to talk to the youth, as well as, you know, satisfy their older companions, the older family members and elders and stuff. Others, however, they got trained overseas, and their English is barely there, and it's rough. It's tough to sit through. Um,
Mm.
and there's a Salafi masjid, and there's a, they're mostly they're mostly of the bid'ah thing, and I get that, and that's important too. I'm not saying don't those tend to be stressed as well, but their their khutbahs are usually very short, very succinct, get to the point. Um, benefits of Ramadan, stuff like that. Um, so yeah, but the masjid close to my job that I go to, there's mostly Pakistani or people from the subcontinent, and the imam there who gives a khutbah, he's fairly young. So his khutbah, I don't know if he was born and raised in the United States, but his English is very good though. So this stuff is, and usually they have I don't know if this is a Hanafi thing or not, but they have like an English talim basically. It's not really a khutbah, it's really a talim, and then the call is on, and then they get the khutbah in
Yeah,
Arabic on the minbar and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
So,
It's like they call it the bayan, because
oh yeah, that's the right proper word. Yeah.
I think there's, like, I've also did with khutbas as well, where you kind of like mix the Arabic. You'll start off with the Arabic, and then you'll say your khutbah, then you'll finish off with the Arabic, sit down, get back up, Arabic, English. But I think there's people out there. I'm not sure. They may well be Hanafis. I think they say like the khutbah has to be entirely in Arabic. So the mosque I go to, the Imam, Alhamdulillah, he's fluent in Arabic. But the Hanafi masjid. So what he does first, he'll do the bayan in English, and then what he will do is he will do the khutbah, but he will actually cover what he spoke about in English in Arabic.
Okay.
So I think that's the difference there.
Okay, yeah, they do the same thing at the masjid close to my job. They do the same thing. The imam will give a bayan, which is usually it's always in English. It tends to be a pretty relevant topic, though they seem to be fairly simple topics. You're not gonna talk about zina in those. He talks about respecting your parents, obeying your parents. Those are all good things. So they are kind of targeting the youth, but it's really young youth. Kids like 10, 15, 10, 12, younger than that. It's still good. It's still decent. I'm not going to say anything bad about him. So he does the best he can. And then they'll call the adhan, and he'll get on the actual minbar, and then everything else is in Arabic. But it's very, very short though. Usually just quote from the Quran, hadith, and then it's over. With the other masjid, those usually the khutbah is in English. With Arabic, of course, you gotta have some Quran in there. You should have some hadith as well. The beginning should be at least begin with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. At least that, and end with some du'as and wrap it up.
Yeah, no, that's important, man. It's important, especially at the moment where there is a lot of issues that are pertinent, affecting the ummah, whether it's zina, whether it's all this gender confusion and knife crime and drugs. Do you know what I mean? These are real problems, man. But also, I think I'm not sure if you have an issue with it there, because from what you're describing is that a lot of it is like got the black mosques predominantly, and then you've got like here and there you got different cultures, people from India or subcontinent. One thing that we do see is there is an element sometimes of Muslims building mosques based on their nationality, and to be honest with you, like where I live, it's a small place, but there's so many mosques, which is alhamdulillah is a blessing. But then you start to think, well, one street, one road may have 3-4 mosques, and sometimes it could well be based on the Afghani mosque, there's a Bengali mosque, there's a mosque for Pakistanis, there's a mosque for just say Kurdish people or Bosnian people. So I think that it can be a bit of an issue sometimes, but I've never experienced an issue where you go into a mosque and somebody will tell you to leave based on your nationality. I think I think there is an element where in reality, the Ummah, and this is what I say, I think that the Ummah, we are connected, we are united emotionally. I think there's problems when it comes to the politics, which we can discuss. But I think emotionally, we are one Ummah, we are connected. And what happens is, I think the enemies of Islam, they will play on certain things just to show how disunited we are. Whether it's like, I mean, it's a common phrase here. I'm not sure if it's in America, but it's a common phrase here. Oh, well, we can't even celebrate Eid on the same day, right? When you speak to someone about like, the problems of the Ummah and stuff like this, oh, well, forget that. We can't even celebrate Eid. And it's this exaggerated emphasis on disunity. But actually, if you think about, in reality, we are united. Certainly from an emotional point of view, but I think what we lack is political unity, right? And I think that's important. And obviously, from a historian as yourself, you will know in history, you will see that the Muslims had unity, even when they may have been different principalities. However, there was still a unity in Ummah. There may have been different authorities in place, right? But generally, the Ummah was seen as one Ummah, whether you was in North Africa, whether you was in the Caucasus, whether you was in Sham, Bilad al-Sham, there was always that emphasis on unity. And And I think that's what they're trying to. I think they're trying to show disunity, but in fact, I think we are united. What we're lacking is political unity. What do you think about that?
Right. There's a one thing I'm gonna answer your question directly in a moment, but overall, something has been in my mind the past couple of weeks is that I'm doing a lot of research right now. I'm doing a series on the Soviet-Afghan War. It's a premium series, so it's not on the regular podcast. I'll send you a link to it if you want to listen to it. Don't worry about it. I know the guy who runs the podcast, so I can get you in there. But anyway, but as I was reading it, and I'm seeing how that also has to relate to the recent with the Taliban retaking Afghanistan recently, and I started going through all the different major events in Islamic history that I know of that I can remember, and I had to come to the conclusion that Allah always wins. Muslims might lose, Muslims may lose, but Allah always wins, and it may not be in our lifetime, but Allah always wins. And it's just crazy to think that most powerful country in the world, the United States of America, spent trillions of dollars in Afghanistan, hit it with the most technological weapons the world has ever seen, the most powerful fighting force the world has ever seen. 20 years later, they had to leave. I gotta say we had to leave because I guess I didn't support it, but I'm an American. So we had to leave after 20 years. And it wasn't that, the United States was overwhelmed by firepower or anything. It's just that they just couldn't do it anymore. And it was just a drain, and they had to pull out and leave, and the Taliban took over. And I'm hearing now that it's not quite as solid as the Taliban still has a lot of challenges ahead of them, of course, but they took back over again. The thing is that, and I think of all the different things that happened throughout Muslim history, starting from the very beginning when the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and his companions had to flee Mecca and go to Medina. We had a setback at the Battle of Uhud, when the guy had a setback at I can't remember the battle, but the first battle with Khalid ibn Walid up in Jordan, the Battle of against me. I can't remember now.
Battle of Muta.
Muta, yes, that's it. The Battle of Muta. All these setbacks, and then the fitnas between the Ali and Muawiyah, and then the Battle of Karbala, and all these things go on, and then on with the Crusaders taking over Jerusalem, and then the Mongols coming through and wiping out most of Baghdad, and all these things happen, but always in the end, I'll say Allah always wins. And it may take some time, and we may not see it in our lifetime. And, I was on one of the khutbahs I gave was about basically holding, being patient and persevering through these hardships, because, we have a short time frame. Our lives are only average 75 years or so. And so we want things to happen right away. And so we see Israel still sitting there, still oppressing the Palestinians. We see that, and we're like, when is it going to change? When is it going to change? When is it going to change? Israel's been around long. Israel's lifetime or existence has been less than the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem so far. And so it hasn't even been as long as the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem. It may be hard to believe that, hard to understand that, but really, the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem was around longer than Israel has been around to this date. So with these things in mind, I always say Allah will win. And even now, Israel has had a very nearly impenetrable veneer as far as Western society has been concerned. They could do no wrong for decades. Israel could do no wrong. And now, even though I don't necessarily agree with all the flags that have been flying next to Palestinian flags now, but still, that impenetrable facade that they've had for so long is starting to crumble. And it's not going to go backwards. It's only going to become even the facade of Israel being a lone democracy in the Middle East and all the other foolishness they said for so long. All that is going to eventually weaken more and more and more. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I don't know what's the plan. Only Allah knows. But ultimately, as I said, Allah always wins. So I know I'm going all the way around to come back to this whole thing is that even during the waning days of the Ottoman Empire, there was when the idea of nationalism really became strong in the Muslim world, particularly in the Middle East. It was strong within, of course, the Young Turks and the Arabs involved in the Arab revolt. Not all Arabs supported spoil all that mess. And actually, Abdul Hamid II, who wasn't the last caliph nor the last sultan, he was the last effective sultan who actually ruled with power. He more or less presented, even though the Ottoman Empire was waning and it was weaker, his effort was try to hold the caliphate together using pan-Islamism. And I hate that word because it's a very modern word, but basically trying to say our Islamic identity is what unites us. And so he used that to withhold that. And so when the Arab revolt started, most Arabs did not agree with it, even though they didn't like everything the Ottoman Empire was doing. They disagreed with it. They was like, "Well, that's rebelling against the caliph. No, we can't do that." That was just, and it was only those few with a massive help from the British Empire, with a lot of weapons and money and bribes from the British Empire and espionage on behalf of C.E. Lawrence, that they were able to even do that. And were it not for that, they would have never won. If it wasn't for that, they would have never done this on their own. But even beyond that, there's just before World War I, Enver Pasha, who was they had already removed the Caliph, Abdul Hamid II, already removed him from power. But at the time, Italy was trying to take over Libya, what's now Libya now. And Enver Pasha, and it was still nominally part of the Ottoman Empire, but the Ottoman Empire didn't have the strength to really hold it against the Ottoman Empire. So Enver Pasha, he got authority from the Turkish government or the Ottoman government at the time to go there and organize the Bedouins and the local fighters, the Omar Mukhtars of the time. He wasn't born yet, but he was born. He was very, very young. To organize the local fight resistance against the Italians, and they were motivated by the fact that a representative of the Caliph came to help them with this.
I didn't know that.
And so yeah, it was amazing. They were so motivated that representative. They still saw the Ottoman Caliph, even though he was a figurehead by this time. The young Turks had already taken over. They had kicked out Abdul Hamid II completely. I forgot his successor. But the point of the matter is, they still saw that they were motivated and grateful for the fact that representative of the Sultan, of the Caliph of Islam, came to help them with this fight. And they did. I mean, even though the Italians did eventually colonize Libya completely, it took them 20 years to do it. They bled them dry before they could finally do it. And they were able to chase the Ottomans out. They forced the Ottomans to withdraw Enver Pasha after a while. And then World War I came, and then it all fell apart after that. But the common sense of Muslim unity was always there. During the Ottoman Empire, you didn't fill out forms based on your race. You fill out forms based on your religion. So, and my whole point of saying this is that the idea of Islamic unity has always been there. And with the Caliph, it was even stronger. So I'm just showing you how you have these different, my long explanation, I know I went way around the topic.
It's really good, bro.
It was to show that when there was political unity, even at its weakest moment, people still held on to it. You had the Berbers of Libya still respecting the Caliph, even though he was powerless. You had the Arabs who disagreed with many of the nationalistic ways of the young Turks, still very, very hesitant to raise arms. And really, most Arabs fought in the Ottoman Empire in World War I against the British and the French and all of them up until the very, very end. So they always remember the Arab Revolt was not really an Arab revolt. It was a revolt of that one family. Really, it was really the revolt of the Hashemi family.
Sharif of Mecca.
Yeah. So, and always one of the things that is impressive about Muslim unity, I try to explain to my kids, they haven't really traveled overseas as much. I've been overseas a few times, and I assure them that, trust me, everyone prays a lot the same. You go in Africa or the Middle East, you can go to any country, any Muslim country, or any country where there's a Muslim or a masjid, and you can go there and pray without having to learn a different language. We're all praying the same way. It might be slight differences, where we hold our hands or moving the fingers and all, but Surah Fatiha, Surah, Ruku, so forth and so on. All the rules are the same number of rakats, same time of day. And maybe some differences about when Asr becomes in or not, but still, it's pretty much the same, and it's pretty much consistent across all these different languages, all these thousands upon thousands of miles, all the different cultures. everyone still prays. If you go to any masjid in the world, and even you might not understand the khutbah, but you can definitely pray along with them. And the prayer, you don't have to learn something new. And so that's those sort of things are where right now, and even though this is a unique year where everyone started at the same time, even though we may have some years where we might start at different times. Once you get past that first day, everybody's on the same page, and we're okay.
Yeah, 100%.
And the second Eid, Eid al-Adha, that's pretty much always the same. Fortunately, it's only one place you can go, so it's always the same. And the difference in Eids is it kind of is blown out of proportion because everywhere throughout history, nobody would have started Ramadan at the same time. That would have been possible because we only know about it now because technology allows us to share information now. But everywhere, it was always local, except for maybe a few places. But
I think from the evidences, I think it's because I've looked into this. I think it's clear that when the moon is sighted, it's now basically binding on the entire ummah. Because if you look at the address isn't to regions, it's to the ummah. However, now we shouldn't have these problems like they might have had in the past because it's understandable. Right. It's like you're not going to get people to certain places. So those people are following the sunnah, they're seeing, going out in their localities, they're seeing the moon, and they're doing what they need to do. Now, where the world is like what they call it, a global village or something, it's very simple. It's very easy to follow this route, which to be honest with you, not is it just in my opinion, the valid opinion, but also it's the most simple one where it's just there's no confusion to it. If it's been seen, and then it's been seen, everyone just does it. But obviously there's agendas and the enemies of Islam, the kuffar, they don't want the ummah to be united on that level. And and that's what just building on what you said, brother Muttaqi, about the political unity. And when speaking to some Muslims and they can't see how the ummah can unite, and what I say is, look, if you are expecting the ummah, all the ummah in all the lands that it covers, they live, to unite at one moment, right? That's not going to happen. What the first thing that's missing is, and you gave a beautiful example about Libya and the Ottomans, right? Is the fact that to unity unity can only be brought about when there's something to unite behind, and that unity has to be singular, right? The thing that you're uniting behind has to be singular. So we see that the ummah had a khalifa, even though you had wilayas and you had certain dynasties, and but the concept was always there was a khalifa, and he was a khalifa for all Muslims. So right now, Muslims might want to unite, but until that the unification factor isn't there, we can't really unite. And also, I think from the way I see it, and when I read the seerah and when I understand how the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how he worked to change society, we see that he changed it in one area. So this, first of all, the change is going to come in one area, right? This leader who's going to emerge, he's not going to emerge, across the whole region. He's going to emerge in one place, and that one place that's going to, where that one place, the state is the Islam is going to be born, in the sense like the Khilafah is going to be born. Then what you will see is like domino effect. You'll see other regions fall in line, disregard the borders, drive the dictators, who are usurping their wealth and sucking their blood, kicking them out, and then giving the bayah, right? So I think that's something that's really important. And I know you've done the seerah. The very first when I actually came across your podcast, it was the seerah, and you'll know this, that unity is an issue of life and death. Where today, I mean, last night after Taraweeh Salah, the Imam is a really good Imam. He spoke about what they do is after the Taraweeh, they will do a bit of like a bayan about some of the things they recited in Arabic, So they were still, near the beginning. So Surah Baqarah and Surah Al Imran and these type of things. And he he spoke about, it was really emotional. He spoke about the death of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the days leading to it. And he was in kind of tears and it was really emotional. But then when I was thinking about this issue about unity, and we see from the seerah that at the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has passed away. You have Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, who, was the best friend. You had Umar radiallahu anhu, who both loved the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, more than themselves, which every Muslim should do. However, what we see is during this critical moment, when people are weeping and the Sharia rule is to bury the deceased as soon as you can, word comes to them that the Ansar have gathered to choose a leader. So what do? They leave this. You gotta imagine the setting. Not a normal person has died here, and not a normal person hasn't passed away. It's the Messenger Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He's passed away. But what do? They go there. Why? Because they know already they've suffered a calamity with the death of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, but they can suffer another calamity which will cause disunity in the Ummah. So when we look at the discussion that happened between them and the Ansar, when the Ansar even suggested one leader from them and one leader from Quraysh, this was totally refused because leadership has to be singular and you can only unite around a singular leadership. So that's why when I'm thinking about the issue of unity and I'm thinking about the seerah, things like this really show the importance. And obviously you're a historian. No matter how bad the end of the Ottoman state was or how people criticize it, and I think we're very much like armchair critics. The Ottomans should have done this, the Ottomans should have done that, right? But they protected the lands for at least 600 years, right? And they did what they had to do. But the point is that you look at the state of the Ummah at the worst possible time of the Ottoman state, and you look at the state of the Ummah today. Huge difference. You'll know this.
During that period of time, in the worst part of, well, the Ottoman, I gotta admit, I was one of those who criticized the Ottoman Empire, and I still think they should have gone into that war, World War I, of course. But once you start reading about them, or at least learning about them, my criticisms, at least for me, my criticisms really had to take a back seat because I realized that
the criticisms are fair, but what I'm saying is what's unfair is without trying to factor in everything that's happening around. Like, understand what I'm trying to say? Like, it wasn't easy.
Right. It's like during the first Gulf War, when people were criticizing the first George Bush for not going into Iraq and overthrowing Saddam Hussein in the first Gulf War in the early 90s. One of the comments that he said that has been perpetuated on and on and on since then was that we want to get involved in a local conflict where the people have been fighting each other for centuries, which is not true. That the people of Iraq have not been fighting each other for centuries. There have been conflicts off and on, but that area has been under the Ottoman Empire. While there have been conflicts, the Ottoman Empire learned long ago that they didn't need to directly control Iraq. They basically had a local ruler or local person who was loyal to them, but was a local ruler who was answerable, came from that local community.
He was a governor, Wali.
Right, and this is the Ottoman Empire was able to manage able to manage an empire that included many different religions, many different ethnicities, many different races across thousands upon thousands of miles, and keep everyone pretty happy. Even the non-Muslims were pretty happy up until nationalism came along, and nationalism began to supersede Islam. Then that's when you have the nationalistic movements of the Christians of the Balkans, and then that even seeped on to the Muslims and of course the Armenians and things like that. So, but for the first 500 years or so of the Ottoman Empire's existence, this wasn't an issue. The local Christians were happy they had to pay their taxes, they had to pay their jizya, but they paid it to their local leader, who then passed it on to the Ottoman Empire, to Istanbul, and their local leader, the Ottoman Empire did not interfere with their religious affairs, nor with much of their judicial affairs. They were able to rule themselves. They just had to pay the jizya and not rebel against the Ottoman Empire, and they're pretty much cool. It wasn't really bad. Nothing would have been perfect. I don't want to sugarcoat everything, but it wasn't nothing like what it is right now. As far as the individual Muslim communities, where Muslim lands, I would say, now during the Ottoman Empire, the last 150 years, of course, much of the Muslim world was colonized by that time. And except for the Ottoman Empire, which they were hankering to get their hands on, the British, the French, and the Russians were just fighting their nails to get their hands on the Ottoman Empire. They just needed a reason to do it. But even with all that, the Ottoman Empire was relatively peaceful compared to the constant warfare we've had since then. Ever since they fell and they drew these imaginary lines in the sand, that's making up all these countries, there's been nothing but conflict ever since then. And when we talk about the stuff in Palestine, that's even more conflict. Even if you just take that part out, just talk about Muslim versus Muslim, not talking about Muslim versus Jew or Muslim versus Christian. Muslim versus Muslim has been conflict ever since then, and going on to this day. Iraq is not stabilized. For all the blood and money that the United States wasted over there, it's pretty much a satellite of Iran by most standards. By most analysts say that it's pretty much a satellite of Iran right now. So as far as the United States is concerned, they have not accomplished its goal. It makes things even worse.
Well, but the way I think you gotta look at it slightly a little bit different is the fact that they went in. I think the Americans, obviously you can't say this, and I'm not even going to ask you your opinion on this, but the 9/11 attacks, this was all orchestrated. They needed a reason to go into the Muslim lands because they could sense there was something brewing. They could sense that Muslims are kind of like getting more closer to their religion, and this could mean, a big problem for the West, for the superpower, America, had the Muslims regrouped and it's implemented Islam and whatever, right? But I think there was an initial stage of trying to win hearts and minds, and I think when the America realized that we've had a dictator over these lot, we've come over and we're expecting them to throw rose petals on us, but they're firing RPGs, right? They're not going to accept this democracy way of life, right? The next best thing is start a sectarian war, destroy the place where people, their main concern is where the next meal is going to come from. It's not about implementing Sharia or taking Islam to the Rome, right? It's about basic survival. Same in Syria now. Look at Libya. Libya was a place where I'm not bigging up Gaddafi. Obviously, he's a dictator, right? But I'm just saying, you speak to people now in Libya and they will say, bring back Gaddafi, because you destroy these regions. So that's why we have to always think, okay, you might not get your primary result, you might not get result A, but then there's B, there's C. And Afghanistan, for example, you're right, they've left Afghanistan. But I think people may not be entirely correct when it appears like they've left defeated, because if you actually look into it, America achieved a lot of its aims in that region whilst it was there. On top of that, right now you probably would argue that as a fighting force, the practice that America had of 20 years urban warfare in Afghanistan, where practicing its weapons and its soldiers, the veterans, they're on another level now compared to any other military who have not been fighting, right? I mean, you look at the Russians again; they're getting a bit of a beating in Ukraine, So I think what we need to look at is sometimes goal A might not be achieved, but I think there's other goals that can be achieved. But going back to the issue that you're saying about Iraq, and I think, I think you make a valid point. That what we experience on a daily basis now. This was something which wasn't there at the time when we had political authority. And actually, if we think about it, the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he described the Imam as being the shield for the believers, who protects them and whom they fight from behind him, and we can see that the Ottomans, who were the last Khilafah. I mean, there were many before who were the last Khilafah. Since their demise, we see that now, look what's happening in India. I'm not sure if you're following the news, but what's happening to Muslims in India, even like in places in Africa, and Kashmir and Palestine, as you mentioned earlier. This level of humiliation is unheard of even in the worst days. Obviously, the Ottomans couldn't do anything about the lands that were colonized now. They weren't strong enough to take them back. So whatever happened in Algeria and these places, it's not like they allowed it. They just couldn't do much about it. However, there were still other Muslims in the Islamic domains that were protected. And I think right now, it's as the Messenger also in another hadith talked about the Ummah, the Muslims will be like food at a dining table. And you'll hear this hadith, the non-Muslims will willfully be eating them because food doesn't fight back, right? And that's the situation. But you mentioned about nationalism, and I want to mention one thing to you before we kind of like maybe wrap things up, bro. Is I do see there is a big push, and there has been since Sykes-Picot, about nationalism, because before you have an identity that the Khalifa is in Istanbul. Now you need a new identity. So you've been given your national anthems, you've been given your independence days and your military days, and just to kind of get you linked to that, bonded to the flag and your national identity. For many years now, there's been not an exception, but there has been a country which has tried to show itself maybe beyond nationalism, and that was Saudi Arabia. But we see recently now, there's been a big push where towards nationalism and and changing the identity of Saudi Arabia from being its identity being Islamic, one of which is Saudi, which is cultural, which is based on nationalism. And I think there's and from what I gather, you're not a big fan of the Macabre, right? The new cube.
Yeah, that I do understand that Saudi Arabia and all the other oil-rich countries know that the days of petrol are numbered. That with electric cars and renewable energy becoming more reliable, that the world will eventually stop relying on petrol or carbon-based fuels. So that's where much of his money comes in. They seem to be following the Dubai and UAE model of building these lavish resorts and tourist sites to bring in those foreign Western dollars. And yeah, I won't say I understand why Dubai does it. I mean, it's fine, I guess, whatever. I don't really care for it. It's not my thing, but I think it's a huge waste of money, but whatever. Saudi Arabia has a long runway. I don't know how much money. I think that Saudi Arabia is not dying for money. I think they have more than enough money and cash stacked up that they should be able to figure out something else. And to spend all this money on this ridiculous cube in the middle of, it doesn't seem like the right thing to do. I think it would be much more beneficial if they would use their money to build up their infrastructure, build up certain industries that are useful and are future looking. Maybe not manufacturing, but things such as technology, software, other medical industries, things like that. They can invest in their future by becoming the Silicon Valley of the Middle East. Right now, the Silicon Valley of the Middle East is Israel. Lots of technology that we use every day comes out of Israel or was started from Israel. Whereas, and Israel does not worry about tourism. They do have tourism, but that's not their main economy. The main economy is American tax dollars. But beyond that, though, they do actually generate a lot of money from just their own private enterprise and businesses and stuff like that. Those are things that would be much more sustainable than trying to become a gigantic tourist destination.
Thing is, though, bro,
And
is I think you have to look at the many factors to understand this situation. You have to understand Vision 2030. You have to understand. I mean that there's general rules of thumb when it comes to Saudi Arabia. The first rule of thumb is that, as Donald Trump said many years ago, that the Saudis won't last 2 weeks without them. It's a fact that the Saudis have no independent will. They have no independent will. They do what they're told by their masters in Washington, right? So when you look at Vision 2030, it's all about spreading liberalism, spreading modernity, and spreading secularism in the lands of the Muslims. In the past, this may have been done by F-16s, and I think America is clever enough to realize it didn't work in Iraq, right? You need some sort of a push which is homegrown rather than foreign boots on the ground. UAE is an active enemy of Islam. UAE right now, I mean, you'll be surprised, bro, that, and I'll send you some of this stuff later, yeah? You'll be surprised that many of the think tanks in America who are anti-Islamic, they receive funding from UAE. Now, that sounds really bizarre. How, right? Trust me, it's happening, right? Obviously, they are trying to push this the issue of normalization, all this. So I think what is the point I'm making is that the issue to do with, I think it's an excuse to do with the oil and stuff like that. It may be true, but like you're saying, you have other opportunities. You can do other things that are halal, right? You understand? To open like resorts and bring alcohol in the land, you know. I mean, Dubai is full of prostitution, right? And the way you got to think about it, there's a saying, and you may know about this. I don't know how authentic it is. And there's a saying attributed to Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, something on the lines of, if you want to destroy a nation, spread zina and pornography and these type of things, right? Fahisha.
Right. I know the saying. I don't know if it came from Salahuddin, but I know the saying.
Yeah, I've heard it was attributed to him, but who knows? But the point I'm saying is that, as we mentioned before, Islam is very preventative. It stops these things, stops people to have a taste. Because, as human beings, once we have a little taste, we might want more, right? Now you open the floodgates. You've got raves going on. You've got concerts. You've got Nicki Minaj. You've got all these people twerking on stage. You got all this stuff now. And you've got a young population who now are on social media. The culture isn't much different to the West because they follow the similar sort of trends, and it's a recipe for disaster. Don't look at it today. Look at it in a generation time. Look at it in 2 generations time. This is the land of the Prophet ﷺ. You've done the seerah. You've lectured on the seerah. What did the Messenger ﷺ and after him the companions? They fight to remove shirk. They fought to remove the idolatry, all these evils from this land. And these guys are now opening the gates wide open to bring it back in under the disguise of economy. Fossil fuel and oil is running out and all this other. It's all a hoax, and this new Muqab. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but what some analysts are saying is, there's a shift where, because Saudi Arabia is going through this process of changing its identity from it being Islamic to more like cultural, like tribal, I guess. I mean, they ain't really got much history, have they? Right? They're not like the Persians, right? So, I mean, I don't know what they're going to try to portray, but it's definitely moving away from an identity of Islam. And I think that Muqab, even though Saudi supporters will say, "Oh, you're exaggerating," I think some people are thinking it's too much of a coincidence that the shape is the shape of the Kaaba. It could be. Yeah. Allahu Alam. At the end of the day, it's irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. However, you can see there's this shift, and as Muslims, this should concern us. because they are the lands of the holy mosques, you know. And not just that, I think also if you look in the region, you know, if you can try to reform the countries in the region, if you can reform Saudi Arabia, and this is why the Israelis, on quote mark, because as I tell my kids, we don't recognize it exists. Yeah. Why do you think it's such a big deal for people like Netanyahu to get Saudi Arabia in the bag? Because they understand that if Saudi Arabia is in the bag, all the other Muslim nations who still see Saudi Arabia as being this religious type of entity because of Mecca and Medina, they will follow suit. It still has. Now imagine if Saudi goes down the wrong route where it opens up its borders to everyone and everything. Then I think a lot of Muslim nations will say, well, if Saudi's doing it, they're meant to be the religious ones. It must be all right.
I mean, I think most Muslim countries are already doing it. So I don't think.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I think well, most Muslim countries are, with a few exceptions, I mean, are republics first of all, but maybe not practicing republics or
You got some kingdoms, haven't you? Monarchies and stuff.
yeah, I was thinking of monarchies that disguise as republics, which are really monarchies though, or republics disguised as monarchies. But not either way, I'm not certain if Saudi Arabia is going to be able to see this whole thing through anyway.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, I'd go back to, even though it's a different country, and while it is good that Saudi Arabia and Iran have recently signed that peace deal or whatever, hopefully that goes on. Overall, I think that's a pretty good thing for them to do.
Shall I tell you? Shall I tell you? Even in this, there's a political aspect, and
of course there is.
I'll quickly mention it is what we're seeing is that America is not in line with this far right government in Israel at the moment. Basically, it goes against American foreign policy, right? America has pushed two-state solution because it wants to solve this issue to integrate Israel into the region. It's always pushed that. Obviously, Trump moved a little bit, he was a bit flexible, but generally they pushed that. Also, with what these guys are doing and the language they're using, it hinders the normalization, because which other country, Muslim country, can tell its population it's okay to normalize whilst they're doing all these things to the Muslims in Palestine, right? So what we're seeing is that over the last maybe 6 months or so, and actually with the legal reforms, the judicial reforms that Netanyahu and his group are trying to push through, a lot of this is purely to change the law so Netanyahu doesn't go to jail, right? So what you're seeing is America is using many different avenues on applying pressure on this government, whether it's to do with how the Israeli delegation was kicked out of the Africa summit, how it's to do with the UAE, who won't do anything without the American say so, how they have kind of like pushed back on a deal where they were going to buy Israeli weapons. So when you see this timing of the Iranians and the Saudis wanting friendship, you have to look at it from a political, geopolitical sense and think, actually, what does this do? This actually adds even further pressure on that government, because wait a minute, if the Iranians are going to be teaming up with the Saudis, then would the Saudis become part of the normalization accords, the Abraham Accords, and secondly, is that a big threat to us now, because Iran and Saudi might team up and go against us? You understand what I'm trying to say? So, but I know what you're trying to say from a Muslim point of view. If you see Muslims coming together, that can only be positive. I just wanted to throw in the kind of like geopolitical aspect where none of these things happen by coincidence.
Right. Well, there's two things there. Well, first, when it comes to those things like, well, with the Saudi and Iranian hopefully coming together and peace deal, I'm thinking more of hopefully less Muslim death. That's my primary outlook for whoever backs it, whatever agendas are around it. If it results in less Muslim death, then hopefully it's a positive thing, inshallah. particularly Muslims killing each other. That's the worst thing. Now, one thing I would say, I don't think the United States is losing a lot of its steam. It's not. It's still definitely military, definitely the most powerful country. Financially, it's kind of weakening there. Maybe I don't know if China has surpassed. Yeah, I think it's surpassed us. They surpassed us for a few months, and then GDP went back, whatever. But between the United States and China, it's roughly dead heat. But the United States might still be ahead. In my opinion, I don't think the United States has as much global influence. It still is definitely at the top, yes, but I think his global influence has waned a lot. Too many
Okay,
things
so
have happened.
if you have a peak and you decline, I agree
Yes,
with America's honest decline.
mhm,
However, it is the superpower, the only superpower in the world,
mhm.
which does dominate a lot of what's going on. However, I totally agree with you. It's on the way down.
Yeah, and also the people don't. Most Americans don't have the political will for another war. I can say that Americans are generally tired of war, and anything that's not a direct defense of the nation would be highly controversial. That's why we're sending
Bro,
weapons to Ukraine and not soldiers.
bro, the reality. I mean, they're not gonna send soldiers to Ukraine anyway.
Right.
You have Ukrainian cannon fodder there. Why send your own boys? Yeah, but
Right.
I can't remember the last time. I'm just gonna throw this in there. We don't need to discuss it, but I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember the last time the Americans actually fought a war. When they
Mm-hmm.
went to Iraq, that wasn't a war. So
Right.
I know you have Americans in America who are fed up of wars, but
Mm-hmm.
the day they actually experience a real war, right? I think they'll
Yeah, we haven't really experienced a real war since maybe Vietnam, and even that wasn't declared a war. But a true, real legal war was actually probably Korea back in the 1950s, and maybe before that, even World War II, probably. So I understand that point of it, but what's called large scale military conflict or large scale military interventions. Right now, most Americans don't really have
100%.
the will for that,
Yeah,
and even though, and also the United States demographics are also aging. We're kept fairly young by immigration, not by having more babies, basically. Just like most other European countries, or even not a European country, but like most other
same like
Western
Europe,
nations.
bro. Same like Europe.
Yeah,
It's the younger people. The demographic is not the natives.
right, right. It's happening like that where we're having less children than are dying. The people are dying on a regular basis. But the United States manages to stay afloat because lots of immigrants come in, and so that keeps it. And it's fairly easy to become a U.S. citizen. You just got to be born here. You're born in American soil, you're a U.S. citizen. It makes it fairly easy. So that manages things out, and the United States pushes the whole nationalism thing where I don't know. I'm compared to like France. France seems to be like there's a French culture that overrides everything. America doesn't really have this. We have an American culture, whatever that may be, but more or less American U.S. citizenship, just being an American, just being here is just all that matters. But my point of saying is that we're not, you know, yes, we're all on the decline, and even on that decline, the decline is still fairly high. But I think China sees this, um, and which is why China probably, I don't say why, but probably why China was able to broker that peace deal between them, and the United States can't really do anything about it internally. Um, the country is very divided. Um, there's lots of there's always been political divisions, but they are very very stark right now. Um, there's a sense of the wealth we have is not real. There's a sense of of the we're about to fall off a cliff at some point in time. We've been riding these, for a while, but there's a sense of, at some point in time, we're going to fall off this financial cliff, and it's going to be 2008 or even worse all over again. So, and also, the president is not the most vigorous president ever. He's a fairly older guy, and that I've always felt that the United States in general takes on the it takes on the attitude of its leader, and I think most nations do this. takes on the attitude of its leader. So if the next president is someone younger, then things may change, but we'll see how that goes.
Sleepy Joe, mate. It's all about Sleepy Joe.
Yeah, so that's the kind of mentality. I just don't think the United States has the political will or the military will to really enforce its way the way it did 20 years ago. It's been humble. Basically, we've been humbled. We've been humbled by Iraq and Afghanistan. Now it may take 20 years may go by, so our ego may get back up there again, but right now we're very much humbled. And the younger generation wants nothing to do with these sort of things. They're not like 20 years ago where Gen X was like, yeah, let's go kill the Muslims. They're not like that anymore. The younger generation is all about kumbaya and love everybody, which has its downsides, but war is not one of them.
No, I see what you mean, man. To be honest with you, there's so many things we could discuss about in regards to China, regards to Ukraine. I've probably recorded quite a few of these episodes, and I know at times you have listened to some. So the next time you're on a hike in the mountain being chased by a grizzly or something, then just just borrow one of the episodes. But bro, I'm gonna have to because time is of essence, and the best time of the day is fastly approaching, which is the time of iftar. So I'm gonna have to kind of cut it short, but yeah, you know what, bro, it was really, really nice catching up with you. It's a pleasure as always, and
same here.
I think normally what I tend to do is I go into these podcasts, these episodes, with a clear topic, but I think with yourself, we can chat about so many different things, man, and that's what I like. And I'm sure the people listening benefited from it. And I would say, for the listeners and those watching on YouTube, definitely drop us a message in the comments field. Let us know what you think. And I would also recommend that you definitely go and check out the Islamic History Podcast. And Brother Muttaqi is now, I think, season 9. You're planning season 9, right?
Yeah, I'm planning. I'm still in season 8, which is the Mughal Empire.
The Mughal Empire.
It's almost over. Mughal Empire should be ending sometime near the end of Ramadan.
Yeah, mashallah. So definitely check it out. It's important as Muslims that we understand our history, that we have an idea of our past, because only then can we kind of like have an idea of what the future may look like. If we don't understand our past, then all the lies and distortions that we're being told, it's easy to believe that we're just we're powerless, and we're just backwards, and we need to change and we need to modernize. In fact, if you look in history, you see that we were the pioneers in most things that people have developed on the research, and now they claim to be the masters of the universe, shall I say. But bro, inshallah, on that note, a big jazakallah khair for joining me.
Oh yeah.
Inshallah ta'ala, I'll definitely be contacting you in regards to a next recording another episode. As you know, it's great having you on. But until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.